Welcome back to War Thunder and welcome to the tank review on the T95E1, the new American rank 5 battle rating 8.0 American medium tank / main battle tank. At first, this tank does look really cool, but the stats don't seem to be really awesome, especially for battle rating 8.0. However, the very unusual thing about this tank is the armament. It has by far the lowest caliber with a 90mm smoothbore gun that fires nothing but AP, FSDS and occasionally a HE shell or a smoke shell. Do I like this tank or not? I think I like it, especially the aspect about the stock grind is a little bit on the chieftain side in comparison, but we will come to this in a moment. Overall, the tank does its job, it can reliably kill its enemies, and that's all that I'm asking for. So let's go right into it. At first, let's have a look at the armor. The lower glacis is not the one thing that protects you, so try to hide it, although it's not extremely vulnerable. At least it's AAA safe with an effective thickness of 196mm. But still, something like big HE shells, APDS, APFSDS, heat shells, that all will go through. The upper glacis is a bit more interesting. With 95mm of thickness, the effective thickness is around about 200mm. But what is more important is the constructional armor slope angle of 65 degrees. And now we have to do some math. There is a 30% interaction rule in War Thunder. That means when your caliber of the shell that you get hit by is 30% larger than the raw thickness of the armor plating, the chance of the shell bouncing is drastically reduced. And it is funny that here the Russian 122mm shells get no benefit from that rule, but the German 128mm does. So yeah, if an IS-4 or an IS-3 is in front of you and aims at your upper plate, you're reasonably safe. But if a Yak Tiger aims at you, you are in a world of trouble and soon a lot of pain. Then there is also this kind of driver's hatch area or driver's viewers port. It is rather well angled at nearly 80 degrees, but it's just 51mm. So again, the 30% interaction rule and even the first signs of overmatch come into place. Now you might notice that on the outer sides, on the outer edges, the plates are a bit bent downwards, making the angle less extreme, and at best you look at 63 degrees with an effective thickness of 137mm. Let's have a look at the side, and the overall side armor is here 51mm. And yeah, the turret ring is 95mm, more on this in a moment. So 51mm is not very thick. You're vulnerable to even some very high HE shells, hash shells, if they don't manage to hit the tracks. Below the or at the line of the tracks, you have just 19mm, again AAA overmatch HE. So keep that in mind. At the engine part, just 32mm. That is not thick. And the rear is 19 and 25mm respectively, rather flat indeed. The deck armor for the engine deck is 25mm. It's not the thickest, but it's not pathetically thin either. So it's kind of average, let's put it that way. Then we also have you can also count this as deck armor, so to speak, 51mm. But that is a bit better against aircraft. But then we also have some structural steel, some toolboxes, I guess. On the other side we have some structural steel of 4mm that might detonate big HE or hash shells and make their effect second to just not as hard, at least, let's put it that way. Then there is the turret, and the turret looks a little bit as a child of an M60 and an M103. It looks really nice, and overall the shape is relatively angled. However, compared to Russian turrets, you don't have quite the thickness. Also keep in mind this is cast homogeneous armor, not rolled homogeneous armor, and that reduces overall the effective thickness and the thickness overall by around about 10%. So the quality factor is just 0.9, around, at least according to testing. That means that this is even weaker at this point than the turret of a King Tiger, and it's also rather flat. But if you miss that, you suddenly go into very strong angles and effective thicknesses exceeding even 500 millimeters. That means sometimes even ATGMs will not go through. For example, the IT1, when it hits you there, it just has around about 500 millimeters of penetration, and here the effective thickness is higher. If then the cast homogeneous armor quality factor goes in, I can't tell, but I can tell you that sometimes I got hit by ATGMs and sometimes I just received damage to the tracks and to the cannon. Talking about the cannon, the gun mantle with its holding is so thick that I never got penetrated here. So again, then we have this kind of roof armor that you can see, again 51 millimeters, quite the same as here. You can bounce lower caliber stuff, but often stuff will go through. And then this part here, this, I guess, gunner's port, gunner viewport, or commander's viewport, if you want to call it, is rather flat. Effective thickness just 75 millimeters. So even the Russian ZDC-57-2 can penetrate here. And talking about strange penetrations, this turret here shouldn't be there according to what a tank makes good and not, because you can get penetrated here even if you're hull down. This is a target that's visible all the time, and you can also shot trap here with hash, heat, AP, APHE, and this is also something that people shoot a lot at, but not every hit is guaranteed to penetrate. We have here 100 millimeters and again 105 millimeters at quite some angles, so the effective thickness is above 200, exceeding sometimes 300 millimeter depending on the exact spot. So as long as they do not get shot trapped, the shells also might sometimes bounce. Also, this is just a target for big HE, hash, or APHE, so that they can splash downwards. The side of the turret, thick at the front and getting thinner and thinner, 127 millimeters. This might be an area where even the 105 millimeter L7 hash might penetrate. But you know, the 90 millimeter hash shells that got added to a lot of tanks cannot penetrate here, but those areas with 76 and 94 millimeters will get penetrated. A few additional tracks here, but nothing to get excited about, although the angle is sometimes a bit trollish, and sometimes if a not very well aimed shot hits you, you can ricochet in, which is very amusing. So the armor is troll, it's not a walkover. I like it, but whenever you want to rely on the armor, it fails you. Whenever you think you're dead, sometimes the enemy just randomly bounces. So it's kind of trollish, both for you and the enemy. The X-ray tells us we have 4 crew members, driver being very centralized between 2 big ammo racks that will get depleted at the end. Then we also have the gunner and the commander on the left hand side, if you look at the tank like I do. So there's that. The commander sits relatively high, by the way, and then also the loader is actually not completely to the right, but a bit protected by the gun breech, which gets damaged a lot, and also then you need to repair it for quite some time. We have 2 additional ammo racks in the turret, this one and this one. Overall, you have 50 rounds of ammunition. You should remove 21 rounds. That will empty those 2 ammo racks and therefore increase your survivability by quite a bit, I have to say. Then you also have the big typical American transmission, engine and fuel tank block in the back. So overall, the tank is not too bad. One thing that surprises me, let's have a quick look in the tech tree, is the placement. It comes after the M103, which is the end of the line heavy tank. So the heavy tank line ends with a medium tank, just so that you can understand the oddity that I had to face. And it kind of sometimes behaves like a medium tank. So talking about medium tank and heavy tank, let's talk about the mobility. And immediately we can see in this comparison that this tank has the weakest engine with just 560 horsepower, but it is the third lightest medium tank in this comparison with just 38.5 tons. So it's around about T62 STB1 weight. So the overall horsepower to ton ratio is 14.5 fully upgraded, and that is not that good compared to the rest of the tanks, excluding the Chieftain, but that behaves more like a heavy tank. So amongst the true medium tanks, it is the weakest, but the difference is not that drastic to the next medium tanks like the T62, 7.8% difference and just under 12 for the M60. Then the top speed with 56 kilometers an hour is kind of average. And overall, in the most certain situations over medium terrain, you will do just around about 30-35 kilometers an hour. Just under the best circumstances, you will actually reach your top speed, but you actually can reach it. Reverse, this is the worst with just -6 kilometers an hour, but you have decently fast neutral steering, so that is a plus point. So overall, the tank is what it feels like, a bit more mobile like the M60, and it is certainly a little bit faster, but it's not outstandingly better. It doesn't seem to have any real advantage in the maneuverability aspect and also the mobility aspect. But now let's talk about the very interesting part about this tank, and that is the firepower. And it's really odd, and at first glance I don't understand why this has a battle rating of 8.0, because it has the lowest caliber gun out of all the tanks in this comparison. The kind of standard caliber for a medium/main battle tank at higher tiers, and especially 8.0, 8.3, would be 105 millimeters. Just the T62 have bigger calibers, and also the Chieftain Mark III with its outstanding 120 millimeter gun. So 90 millimeter is kind of underwhelming for this T208E9 gun. Your shell complement of 50 shells is also not very outstanding. In fact, it is kind of average. Just the T62 with its 115 millimeter gun has just 40 shells. Now keep in mind that you also have to take out 21 shells to empty the turret. Makes the reload all the more awkward, because 8.6 seconds for an ace crew is 0.3 seconds longer than for the M60 with its 105 millimeter gun. You're significantly longer in your reload by 17.4% compared to the Leopard 1. And just again, the T62 has 40% longer reload. And even the Chieftain shaves off over 10% reload rate with its 120 millimeter gun. So the reload rate is not disastrously bad, but for that kind of caliber you expect much faster reload. Again, this might be due to the turret design and where the crew is placed and how the ammo racks are accessible. The turret rotation speed, on the other hand, is outstanding. It feels like playing it in arcade. 36 degrees per second is way above even something like the Leopard. And the T62, well, it has just around about half that rotation speed. Then there's also the gun depression of -10 degrees and also upwards 20 degrees. The elevation speed is not very good with 4 degrees per second. And this tank has no stabilizer. Again, this is very awkward because you expect extremely good gun handling for this low caliber gun. But I think this all doesn't make really sense up until this point before we talk about the ammunition. Overall, we have 3 shells, and the first being the T95E1 4H high explosive shell. Due to the nature of the caliber, you just have an explosive mass of just over 1 kilogram with a penetration value of 14 millimeters against all angles at any range. That puts you into the region where you could initiate hull break, but I guess you should not really use this shell. Although the muzzle velocity of 1143 meters per second is really great for an HE shell. The next shell that I want to talk about is the T320 AP FSDS armor piercing fin stabilized discarding sabered shot. And that shell actually justifies a lot of the things that I firstly would be really of a downgrade for this tank when I had a look at the tank gun and so on. So it is practically an improved APDS version in both muzzle velocity, penetration behavior, reliability compared to the APDS on the L7 gun variants, and also the damaging effect seems to be very nice indeed. For some bizarre reason, this shell still introduces hull break on certain vehicles, which is amazing because 90mm is not very big for a caliber, and AP FSDS shells are practically sub-caliber rounds, so the actual shell hitting the tank is much smaller. Again, with 1570 meters per second muzzle velocity, this is the 4th fastest APDS or AP FSDS shell in the game as far as I can recall it. Just the T10M with its 1620 meters per second muzzle velocity for its APDS shell and 1615 meters per second for both T62 AP FSDS shells on it are faster, but not by so much. So it's very easy to lead, very easy to aim, even at longer distances. I think I have no problems hitting targets reliably at 2 kilometers. And also you can see here the angle of attack ricochet zones are very good. 12 degrees, 13 degrees, 14 degrees respectively is very tightly grouped, and that should even go through a lot of the Russian armor. And that is just something that I noticed. I trust this shell. I think this shell can deal so much better with a lot of the Russian medium tanks frontally, even when they are slightly angled. And that just makes me happy indeed. So the third shell type is a tier 4 upgrade, and that is the T339E14 smoke shell. The stats overall in terms of explosive mass, smoke screen radius, smoke screening time, and smoke screen hold time are kind of average, but I think 1143 meters per second muzzle velocity is really nice. So the good thing about this smoke shell is that you still have a fast enough reload time to fire an APDS round, reload a smoke shell, smoke yourself or the enemy up, and just relocate or repair. And while you are in the smoke, just aim at the very same spot, because the muzzle velocities are not too much different. I mean, yeah, you just have to lead a bit less width than the AP FSDS shell, but you can reload it while still there is smoke, fire, and reload a smoke shell again, and so on, so you can alternate. So my recommended ammunition loadout would be 21 AP FSDS shells, 7 smoke shells, maybe 1 HE shell. So that is what I use and what I recommend. So one last thing to the overall ammunition. You can see this tank is limited to HE and APDS or APFSDS. And overall, even in those respective comparisons, the shells are the weakest in many respects. And that is very, very awkward. So again, why the battle rating of 8.0? This tank is not the fastest, it's not the most maneuverable, it doesn't have the fastest reload rate, the ammunition doesn't replace HESH or Heat FS nor APHE, which this tank just simply lacks of in overall ammunition variety. This might be historically accurate for the smoothbore gun. Again, it's the second one next to the T62. But again, if the APFSD shell wouldn't be that reliably and that destructive, as you could see in the background by now, this tank would be really, really bad. But thankfully it's not the stock Leopard 1s and M60's APDS shell, which is highly unreliable and not very damaging in comparison. So, let's get on with the gameplay. So, and this is the match that I wanted to show you. This is on jungle, and you kind of will see what this tank is practically capable of. Now, in any given tank review, it is completely impossible to go in every situation that there is. However, I thought that the games that I played so far with this tank are sufficient to make a good review of this tank. Certainly the footage was not the difficult part. By the way, I tried to avoid going here for A and go here for the hill on the middle island in the north at around about sector DE5. And from that you can really help out your team greatly, catch a lot of the pressure that would normally go for the A point and snipe also from their spawn point into there. That they end up a little bit of long range spawn camping is, I guess, due to the map design. Overall, jungle is a nice map. It prefers the gameplay of this tank, I guess. And overall, I like the map, but the positioning of the spawns respectively to the cap circle on this map is not the optimal solution, but that is not every game that you will face. And you can see this tank goes across the landscape quite nicely. This is a mixture of water, muddy sand and medium terrain, and still we can hold around about 30 kilometers an hour. But in the water, yeah, it's going a little bit slower, to be honest. It's not a speed demon. I guess the ground resistance stats for this tank are not the very best. In mud, this tank really slows down, but so do a lot of other nations' tanks. Not every tank can have the ground resistance stats of a Maus/E100, which are not that bad, by the way. So here I'm slowly going up the hill and think to myself, well, now you have to be careful with your surrounding. You really have to observe everything that there is. And that was quite a challenge to kill this BT5. I hope you got the sarcasm there. And again, just keep an eye on the kill cam, as it shows a lot of shrapnels, a lot of damaging effect overall. A center mass shot is not the worst thing that there is. Of course, if you have a side shot, still it is preferable to aim for the ammo rack. But again, also look at this, how the shell goes through the engine and damages also a little bit the crew. And this was not the best scenario, but the next shot kills the radiator, the guy burns, and I retreated sideways on. And that is very important because of the shape of the turret. If I would have reversed normally, he still could have accurately put the shell somewhere into my turret, but because I went sideways, it seems like he hit one of the angled parts of the side cheeks of the turret and the shell ricocheted. So this is one of the few tanks where Russian tanks actually have to aim. And then this was the part that I practically spawn camped but I did not really notice it because I didn't look at the minimap. Now from this point on, the positioning is kind of awkward. Again, I'm not directly spawn camping because I'm halfway across the map, but I'm actually firing into their spawn location. Now this tank does here a great job of actually, yeah, blinding my perfect aim, so to speak, with machine gunning in front of me, kicking up a lot of dust. And then I switch actually target because I think I will not fear that T94-100 that much. I pepper him a little bit with the machine guns, a few hits into him. Then I get hit by another target, another tank. I did not know what it was. It was another T-44. I tracked him, and then I shoot a little bit with the machine guns, hit the driver, and kill that CIS-43. And I kill also the T-44 by killing the crew, not the Armour. So good result right there. And that is the reliability that I spoke of. Those shots are nothing spectacular. They are more or less normal. Killing here a SU-100 with one shot. Again, beautiful shrapneling inside of the tank, spalling effect, whatever you want to call it. And another shot at this CIS or ZSU-37, giving me a quadruple kill streak. Again, spawn camping, yeah, suppressing fire. You know, other YouTubers would call it like pressuring the cap circle or just making use of game design. It is up to you how you judge it, but at the end of the day, it is effective. If you want to call something like spawn camping not existent, this is footage that just tells me a different story. Now, at this point, I was kind of disappointed that I didn't get hull break on that ZSU-57 too, but the next shot actually gives me hull break on the turret, but not the hull. So, yeah, very interesting. At this moment, the gameplay is not really, you know, me driving around. I showed this in numerous clips before. I also showed you an arcade battle. I looked around me, somebody pinged the map. I didn't see here anything, but watch that shot on the upcoming target. It's just one enemy left, and here he lurks around. He did nothing the entire team. I wait up until he levels out. Looking at the side of the pike nose design, this shot was relatively safe, giving me my 8th kill. And that was quite a battle, so the cap ticks down on Chang'e faster than usual, I guess, which is nice because it gives you many more minutes that you can use in another battle. And 8 kills in that amount of time, that's quite something. So let's have a look at the post-battle results. And again, I kind of like this tank, but I also had a lot of battles where I just couldn't do anything. So 43,000 silver lines, 3,172 modification research points, vehicle research points, 4,091 for the T95E1, incidentally, because I got a test drive for 1 week from Gaijin. So thank you, Gaijin, for providing me that to allow me to make a review on this tank. And yeah, that is the T95E1. Not the best stats at 8.0, but it still works, and the AP FSDS shell kind of redeems it from the rest of the remaining stats, in my opinion. That's it for me today, so thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed this video and I could give you some tips and answer the question if this tank is worth going for. I say yes, especially if you don't like stock grinds. This tank is fun to play. Give this video a like if you did, subscribe if you want to see more, and we'll see each other on the battlefields of War Thunder.